I'd like to welcome everyone to the special edition of Xpress Outdoors here at Grosse Savanne Lodge. This is our first annual State-of-Waterfowl meeting. And if you're a duck hunter out there, you know there's a lot of disturbing things going on right now with migration patterns. The big question is, where are all the ducks? And here at Grosse Savanne, along with the help of Xpress Boats, we were able to put this team of experts together that are in the know with waterfowl research, and just sit down and spend a day talking about what's actually happening in the Mississippi Flyway. So when we put this panel of experts together, one of the things we wanted to do was make sure we had a non-biased opinion on what's going on in the Flyway. And so we were able to find a team of people that are not associated with any organizations. They don't have an agenda. They're not paid by anybody that's trying to tell them what to say. And these guys have basically dedicated their life to waterfowl research. And there's probably not another group in this country that is as knowledgeable about what's going on in the waterfowl world as it is today. And so we're going to sit here today, we're going to spend the whole day picking their brains and talking about what do we know. Scientific, factual information, not opinions, not speculation, but what do we know? And at the end of the day, you as a viewer hopefully can formulate your own opinion as to what may be going on in the Flyway. So before we get cranked up here, let me introduce a few of our guys. And I'd love to tell you all of these guys' resumes that they sent in is phenomenal, you know, and we, if we talked about all the papers that have been written and all the degrees that have been earned, we could be here all day, but give you a little brief synopsis of these guys that are here. We have Mr. Larry Reynolds. Larry is the Waterfowl Program Manager for the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Larry has a master's degree from Texas A&M University, and Larry's done a lot of work in Louisiana and some other states on waterfowl, and we appreciate you being here today. Our next guy is Kaysen Sharp. Kaysen is the owner of Bill Byers Hunters Club in Brinkley, Arkansas. Kaysen comes from a long lineage of rice farmers and conservation-minded people in Arkansas, and he's going to give us a hunter's perspective from the Arkansas area while he's here. And our other guy, he's somewhat of a legend in the world of waterfowl research. Dr. Mickey Heitmeyer is from Missouri. Dr. Heitmeyer runs Greenbrier Wetland Services that provides wetland information to guys that are trying to manage for moist soils and different things like that. And he has got a resume a mile long on research in duck world, and he's pretty much an expert when it comes to mallards. You've set the pace for the research in the United States. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Our other gentleman here to my left is Dr. Dave Duncan. He is out of Edmonton, Canada, and you've done quite a bit of research in Canada with pintails, and he is more or less the expert on the prairie pothole region in Canada. Spent his whole life working in that area, and most recently he's retired from the Canada Wildlife Service, and we're hoping to lean on him for some information coming out of the prairie pothole region. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Next guy in line you may recognize from television, we got Jim Ronquist. He's the co-host of RNT TV and also works for RNT Calls. Jim's also here representing the hunting industry, and Jim has hunted from the Gulf Coast all the way up into Canada and probably covered more ground than any of us in this room for his different places to hunt. And Jim's also very conservation minded and has a lot of input to put into our discussion today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And last but not least is Paul Link. Paul is originally from North Dakota, but we've kind of adopted him here in Louisiana. Paul has done some really cool telemetry work. He is currently employed by Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, and he's going to present some information on what he's learned so far with some of this new telemetry going on. So we appreciate you being here. So before we get cranked up here today, like I said, there's going to be a lot to talk about, a lot of questions, and we've prepared somewhat of an agenda to follow. But before we get started, I'd like Dr. Heitmeyer to give a few opening comments on where we're at, why we're here, and provide a little insight more into what we're doing here today.
Well, first off, Doug, I think I can speak on behalf of the other folks that are here. Thank you, and thank Xpress Outdoors for allowing us to be here and inviting us to be here to talk about ducks. We're all passionate. We all care about waterfowl. I think everybody that's going to be watching this episode in this meeting is probably just as passionate as we are. I want everybody to know that everybody at this table is an active hunter. Some of us have spent our entire lives studying ducks. Other people have spent our entire lives growing food for ducks. Some have spent their entire lives not only hunting ducks, but trying to educate the public about waterfowl and conservation. And we all recognize that sportsmen and hunters are probably the greatest conservationists and the reason we have the resource we do. Waterfowl are these amazing animals, and their adaptations, their morphology, body plumage, colors, their behavior. It's no wonder that people love ducks, not just to hunt, but also to watch, to observe, and enjoy. They're continental, and so consequently the management that we do for them must be done at a continental scale too. That's why individual states don't make decisions just for that state, and we have cooperation with Canada and Mexico, Flyway councils, all the states are involved. And that really then becomes a foundation when we start talking about not only maybe what happened this last hunting season that some people are concerned or care about, but looking into the future. What do we need to do? How do we need to work together? How do we kind of put our biases aside? Think really hard, clear about where we need to go. And hopefully we can maybe provide some answers or at least some thoughts, some stimulation about that as we meet today. The issues that affect waterfowl, we kind of put in two categories. One is the short-term sort of things. Why do birds do things this year versus last year? We call it interannual sort of movements or migrations or behaviors or whatever. And those short-term things then are affected by climate, obviously, as we understand, weather patterns this year compared to last year, what changed from the habitat base from one year to the next, what changed from our harvest regulations or things that affected hunter participation. And so those short-term sort of things are kind of in one category. They're very different, though, than maybe the bigger, harder questions about long-term, ultimate reasons that we're seeing some of the things that we've been seeing. So those ultimate, long-term questions, I think this group around the table will have some insight and maybe be perhaps even a little more interesting to folks about why we're seeing some of the changes that we've had. The changes relate almost similarly to annual variation, weather patterns. What's changing climate-wise in North America? We all recognize climate change is occurring, it's real, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll also talk about the landscape, the place that these animals live in. What's changed in the habitat that these birds have adapted to historically, meaning primarily the wetland component, and then also the contemporary landscape that these birds actually live in today that's affected by agriculture, urban development, water resource developments. The floods of this year have certainly put that into perspective for us. So the landscape has changed. It's not the same playing field that the birds had even 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So we're going to talk about that. And then last, we're not going to avoid discussing what we as people have an impact on the birds, and that includes harvest, hunting opportunity, how many we're killing, who are we killing, where are we killing the birds, does it have an impact on them? We're not going to avoid those subjects. So this will be kind of a fun discussion. We're not probably going to hold really anything back. As Jim had stated, we're not really, most of us are not affiliated with any specific group or whatever. We'll give you our history of information, our experiences, and hopefully that will help you to understand what's going on and also to kind of frame our discussion. It's interesting in 2018 and 19 that a lot of waterfowl hunters saw some things that maybe concerned them if they were not having as much success as they'd had in previous years. And consequently, also, some folks had a wonderful season. And so those questions about what has changed and maybe what has not changed are at the forefront of our discussions and concerns. Some of us old-timers find this kind of interesting because almost the same questions have kind of been asked repeatedly in the waterfowl management world, if you will. Was a good friend of ours, Dale Humberg, used to work for Ducks Unlimited, Missouri Department of Conservation, kind of a historian, pulled together some information that almost the exact question about where the birds were, why they were not in certain places, did agriculture play an impact, were we killing too many of them, did the habitat change, were asked in 1921, and they were asked in 1947, and they're asked in 1957, and more recently at the Flyway they were asked in the early 2000s and even the 1990s, so deja vu. We're asking some of the same questions, but we're in a different world. The world in 1920 is different than it is in 2019, and that's maybe kind of the good and the exciting and also the challenging and the bad about it. So these questions have come around. We'll probably be here 15, 20 years from now as well, and yet they're the fun and interesting and challenging things to talk about.